I'll let Patty turn it on. Ready? Good evening and welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting for January 13th, 2015. Happy New Year, everybody out there, and welcome back to our council meetings. First item on the agenda is the roll call. Please call the roll.
Ernstler.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Sedlacek. Williams.
Present.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Markham.
Here.
Fowler.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Thank you. Let the record show we have a quorum. Next item is the pledge. Please stand. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3 is the approval of the consent agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved, Alder Markham. Second, Williams.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Nelson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Maybe, good thing you put on the audience.
Next item on the agenda is the audience portion where people sign in to address the council and tell us what's on their mind. This evening, we have none that signed in. We encourage people to come down and tell us what your thoughts are. Moving on, item 5, public hearing. I declare a public hearing open regarding proposed industrial development revenue bond financing for OCS Plymouth LLC project. And maybe I'll ask our administrator to give us a short summary, or Attorney Fever for a short summary on that. And then we'll open it up for public comment. Attorney Fever?
The council has before tonight the final resolution regarding industrial development revenue bond financing for OCS Plymouth LLC. And the council may remember passing the initial resolution in October expressing its intent to issue these bonds. This is for the acquisition of land and the construction of approximately 220,000 square foot facility at 4385 County Road PP in Plymouth. It'll be constructed to age cheese. So the final resolution is authorizing the bonds, and if the council passes that, there will be a notice to the electors advising them of the bond sale. The bonds are not to exceed $10 million. And as a reminder, this is pass-through financing. This is not indebtedness of the city, but because this project is taking place entirely within the city limits, this is a financing option that's available to the borrowers. Certainly, if there's questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
We've done this type of financing in the history of the Plymouth, the city before, and once again, the company has come forward and asked us to participate in that. Any public comments? I declare a public hearing closed. Moving on to resolutions 6A, Resolution 2, consideration of final resolution regarding industrial development revenue bond financing for OCS Plymouth LLC. You just heard Attorney Fever comment on why we're doing this as a pass-through entity. Chair will entertain a motion so we can discuss.
So moved, Alder Markham. Second, Alder Williams.
We have a first and a second. to approve Resolution 2, consideration of final resolution regarding industrial development revenue bond financing for OCS Plymouth LLC. Discussion. Any questions of Attorney Feber? I think it's pretty straightforward. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Hanson.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item 6B, Resolution 1, a resolution to not exchange current ownership interests in ATC LLC and ATC Management Incorporated. I'll ask Administrator Jurgis to give us a brief summary.
This is a unique resolution language, and it didn't have to be a formal resolution. It could have just been a motion, but we put it in the form of an official resolution, and this was the language recommended by Boardman and Clark. And again, it just says that the City of Plymouth does not exchange its current ownership interest in ATC LLC and ATC Management to a restructured company designed to expand the company's investment in transmission outside ATC LLC's current footprint. That's the extent of the resolution. It is very brief language, but over the course of a number of months, I communicated to the council various information to you regarding the ATC restructure. And that information is also, again, in your packet for tonight. And I want to reference the two documents just to real quickly run through them, just to recap and remind you and summarize again what this is about. Page 2 of the presentation basically outlines, that ATC, which, so the City of Plymouth through Plymouth Utilities, it was Plymouth Utilities assets that went into the investment. We own north of $4 million of ATC, which represents less than 0.25% of the company, so it's a very small percentage. That value was made up of originally a cash as well as transmission assets that Plymouth Utilities had. And ATC was formed 10 plus years ago at that time to facilitate a more reliable grid and more investment in transmission in Wisconsin. So ATC is essentially a big tollway or pipeline. It's just that it is transmission assets. The City of Plymouth through Plymouth Utilities owns a very small percentage of the company, and we're one of I'm not sure how many, but one of a group of municipal investors, and then the rest of the company is primarily owned by investor-owned utilities or for-profit utilities, but a small percentage is owned by Wisconsin nonprofit utilities like ours, as well as WPBI Energy. Well, over the 10 plus years that they've been in existence, they've built out their grid, they've met their reliability standards that they need to meet, and they have other projects which they're finishing out, and kind of the growth of ATC is slowing. And since it is a private corporation, the question is where do we go from here? Well, since the company is primarily owned by investor-owned utilities, those investor-owned utilities are pushing the corporate structure and the corporate board of ATC to look for growth opportunities. Well, where are those growth opportunities? Primarily, they're out east, they're out west, they're in the Midwest, but they're not in Wisconsin. And as a result, they're looking to change the corporate structure into a holding company to separate the development, the business development activities, the new investments, new power line projects that they would own in other states from its core business of transmission in Wisconsin. So that's kind of what this is about. Legislators and regulators have questioned what are the impacts of such business development activities to Wisconsin ratepayers. So that's another reason why they're looking at changing the corporation. Page 3 shows the current structure And where it says investors, 99.98% of the company, that's where the city of Plymouth falls into, and it's ATC LLC. Underneath that, you see DATC. That stands for Duke Energy and ATC. That was a partnership that they had on a project out east, and ATC owns 50% of that venture, and Duke Energy, another large for-profit corporation, investor-owned utility, owns the other half of that. On page 4 of that presentation, it kind of shows what the potential holding company structure would look like. And it's adding in the middle that ATC holding company. If the city of Plymouth wanted to be part of that, we would take action to be part of the holding company. If we decide to approve the resolution that's on the agenda tonight, we're saying we do not want to be part of the holding company. We want to stay at ATC LLC, which is the traditional footprint in Wisconsin. Page 5 kind of outlines, according to ATC, their reasons for doing it: cleaner financial structure for rate-making purposes, potential credit insulation for the Wisconsin business, and better regulatory posture when they move forward to get projects approved. And it allows members to opt out of investments outside of the traditional footprint. Page 6, at the top, it just says members will need to assess their ability to invest at the holding company level. So at the end of the day, the question is, if you recall, quarterly we have something that's called capital calls, and we put in money to meet part of the cost of doing capital projects. We make a capital project or capital contribution for capital projects from the utilities that goes toward infrastructure improvements, and we get a return off of that, and that's added to the value, the base value, which is $4 million some dollars, and over time that's continued to grow. So the question is, ultimately, would we have the ability to invest in projects outside of Wisconsin and meet those future capital calls? So that's ultimately, it's primarily, not only it's a regulatory question, but it's primarily I would say a financial capacity question. So that's the ATC highlight I wanted to quickly hit on. Then I want to reference the Boardman and Clark memorandum, which, for your information again, Boardman and Clark is representing both WPPI, but also all of the municipal utilities that own a portion of ATC. Their scope of work is twofold. One is to basically kind of did this legal analysis and facilitated some discussions that have occurred at WPPI on the pros and cons of joining the holding company. The second piece is because we are minority ownership, there's going to be new operating agreements. And they are reviewing those new operating agreements, and as much as possible are working on our behalf and other municipal utilities in making sure that as best deal that we can get as part of those operating agreements we can get. Of course, we are a minority owner. So again, the memo is again, they want to create a new holding company to facilitate investment outside of Wisconsin. We have a one-time election to either retain our current membership shares or transfer to the restructured company. So this is a one-time decision. We cannot go back and change our decision at a later date. This memo kind of highlights that there's municipal finance issues and regulatory issues with us moving to the holding company. Under municipal finance restrictions at the bottom of the first page, it kind of highlights again that ATC was formed based on enabling legislation that happened 10 plus years ago at the state level. Page 2 kind of there's some bullet points at the top there, and it's the second bullet point down, which says, a bigger concern for municipal owners in the newly restructured transmission company will be the potential need to issue debt to finance large capital calls. And then it goes forward and talks about that. At the end of the day, and then below that it talks about PSCW treatment. One of the things you need to realize is that our investment in ATC is considered below the line. What that means is that the investment that we make in ATC and the return we get from ATC is below the line or not part of our electric rate case making process. Okay, so it is below that. So our utility rates would not cover any losses that would occur through our ATC investment, and our ATC and our rates are not set up to generate more capital to invest in ATC. It's just excess earnings we have, we're able to put back into ATC and reinvest them, but it's not part of our regulatory rates. It's called below the line below the line accounting for our ATC investment. And as a result, we cannot pledge utility revenue debt to cover an investment in an ATC projects outside of the state of Wisconsin. Why? It's not only below the line, but a second reason is there's no benefit to, there's not a public benefit to our utility customers in terms of infrastructure. The infrastructure built in California benefits people in California. It doesn't benefit local ratepayers, and therefore local ratepayers shouldn't take the risk of that capital project, okay? And so we cannot issue debt on a revenue basis to fund our ATC investment, okay? That leads us to the second question is, could we invest in general obligation debt for a project outside of Wisconsin for an ATC project? The answer is possibly yes, but the issue is we would probably violate arbitrage ruling, which basically says you can't borrow on a tax-exempt basis and then invest it in a way where you generate a greater return, which would make it a taxable bond issue, which we could issue. So if we got a return on an investment at 9% on a project outside of Wisconsin, and it cost us 6% to borrow, the gap is 3%, right? So in theory, would the math work out? Potentially, it would be on a taxable. Of course, we would be subject to interest rate risks. We're in an environment of very low interest rates. If the rate of return is capped at 9 or 10%, and we're in a high, and over time we become in a higher interest rate environment, that margin would be squeezed and it could create an issue for us. The second issue is by constitutional debt limits, no more than 5% of our equalized value can we have in general obligation bonds. And right now I think we're using, I don't know, 60 or 70% of our capacity right now. We flipped a number of our utility projects into GO debt the last couple of years to take advantage of interest rate savings. But the issue is in this scenario is, could we do it on GO basis? Taxable, yes. But if they're swinging for the fences and they're looking at doing billion-dollar projects, you take our percentage ownership multiplied by $1 billion, that's still a large dollar amount. And if they hit multiple billion-dollar projects, which could be possible, over time it's going to take more and more of our funds to put into that investment. When we can only borrow up to 5% of our equalized value over time, even if we wanted to make the investment on a taxable basis, on a GO basis, we could be in a position where all of our general obligation debt is being used to fund ATC projects outside of the state of Wisconsin that have no direct benefit to either our ratepayers or our taxpayers. And there's also some a regulatory issue as to whether it qualifies as a municipal investment underneath Wisconsin statutes. And the total analysis of that hasn't been done, but that is also a risk. The bottom line, if I were to try and summarize this, is at the end of the day, legal counsel, management of all of the utilities have been participating in meetings to review this. WPPI has been involved in the meetings. At the end of the day, basically no municipally owned utility feels that it is possible to make this jump to the holding company and make this investment in transmission assets outside of the state of Wisconsin. So what we'd be approving is basically a resolution that says we want to stay exactly where we are. We want to own keep our current ownership interest of ATC in Wisconsin, and we will not be participating in the holding company and will not be investing in projects outside of the state of Wisconsin. I know that is a lot. I tried to boil it down. I know this is technical and complicated, but any questions on what you would be voting on or about the specific technicalities of the legal research or what ATC is trying to do?
Alderman Nelson?
Not sure how to ask it. It's a little confusing, but, so basically, we would have potential maybe to make more on an investment outside of the state, but this way it's lower risk, we're protecting our
Yes and no.
utility
There are
people,
different
or-
portions of the state or country that have different regulations and regulatory bodies that influence rate of returns. And then there's also the federal government. And then you're dealing with states, you're dealing with these regional organizations, and you're dealing with the federal government. We make 10-12% on our investment today. Part of that is we don't get all of that in dividend. About a third of that, 33% of that is automatically reinvested in capital, and then we get a 67% of the 10 or 12% we get in the form of a dividend check. So that's good revenue for the utility. Could we generate more, a greater investment outside of Wisconsin? Probably not, but the scale of investment would grow, and we could put more cash in projects outside the state and earn more money, but you have to put more cash in to make more money out. And with the debt limits that we would have as a small municipality, it would only take a couple of large-scale projects, and it would be difficult to fund the capital calls, which then, if we don't fund the capital calls, everybody else does. Our ownership interests or our ownership gets diluted, and we have a smaller and smaller ownership percentage over time. The other thing we're doing, though, is we're taking on risk for investments and trusting that the for-profit investor-owned utilities are acting in our best interests. Well, for-profit investor-owned utilities don't always act in the best interests of a nonprofit utility like ours. So does that kind of answer your
Yeah,
question?
I think
It
so.
wouldn't necessarily be a greater percentage, but they're clearly looking at it as more opportunities to grow the company and grow revenues, because those revenues then from a project in California are going to the investor-owned utilities here in Wisconsin, which is a way for that. They're not building power plants. They're not, transmission is going to slow, so they're looking opportunities to generate more revenue and sustain their dividends.
Any other questions?
Mayor Coleman?
Alderman Henson.
I move to approve Resolution 1, a resolution not to exchange current ownership interest in ATC LLC and ATC Management.
We have
Second, Alder Markham.
we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? I think it's prudent to try and maintain our ownership share, which we've done since we got into it years ago, and we've been able to afford to do that through the utility, knowing that we're under sort of a managed structure and we're part of that.
And just so
Right.
the council knows, it doesn't change that we're still gonna have capital calls, we're still
Right.
gonna be investing in transmission in Wisconsin, so nothing's going to change. The operating agreements are gonna change slightly, but again, Boardman and Clark is representing the municipal group on that, but, you know, you're not gonna see any change in anything in how we handle ATC.
Right, and I think to that extent, you know, we've been able to maintain our ownership share and not dilute it by meeting the calls and so on, which we're directly part of. My concern, if we were to go the other way, Brian, you said it best, the increase call dollar volume multiples could well exceed our potential of availability without bonding or something else. And at that point, it's no longer a positive influence on our, so I think you spoke of it very well, and we, I think the resolution is correct the way it's worded. Alderman Hanson.
When was the last time we put new monies in?
We do it quarterly.
Yeah.
There's capital calls quarterly, and then it ranges in dollar amount based on the capital needs of the company.
And by doing this, it won't change our,
That won't change that. We're still gonna continue to invest in Wisconsin. But over time, the growth of the company has accelerated. The overall value of the company and growth of the company, in the first few years, it was growing 20-25% a year in value. And that has slowed, and I want to say maybe we're at the 7-8%, and that's going to continue to slow a little bit. But partly is because the transmission projects have been built out to meet the reliability standards that are needed, and to meet future demand and current demand. So as those need for more projects slow, overall growth in Wisconsin is going to slow, and it's going to slow over time. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the investors own utilities are looking at that and say, okay, we're slowing now. What can we do to have more growth and generate revenue from other areas? And that's where they're looking at, investing in projects outside. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to is, some of these like billion-dollar projects, we're competing with other providers potentially or other utilities to get them. So let's say ATC development company spends $25 million on trying to design and get a project built, and at the end of the day they don't get the work and another company gets it. That $25 million has to be paid for by the owners of the company. So that's the regulatory business development risk is, ATC is not guaranteed to get these large projects because they're going to be competing against other utilities. And in the case of the Duke Energy, the reason they were able to get that project is because they agreed to own 50%, and Duke would own 50%. It was a 50-50 deal. Duke realized that ATC is good at focusing only on transmission and projects and doing that more efficient. So that's kind of a test project for the Duke ATC relationship.
There's nothing wrong with earning 7 or 8% in today's market and doing what you do best sometimes. As in the community, we got a lot of companies that specialize in what they do best. So, any other comments? I think it was well explained and a good job on that. Brian, clerk will call the roll.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Fernsler,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Item 7 is not needed. We did not remove anything from the consent agenda. Item 8, committee reports and action. Committee on Aging, approve recommendation for Senior Center Fund grant in the amount of $640 to Plymouth Intergenerational Coalition, PIC, for bookshelves. We have a memo on that, and I'll call on Alderman Williams if he wants to add anything to it before I entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mayor Pullman. Previously, the PIC had applied for and was given by this council a $10,000 grant out of the senior fund to buy various items and so forth. One of the items that they indicated they was going to purchase was some shades for doors. That was changed to some glass that they ended up paying for themselves, so the shades will never be bought. And the other items were weights and bands for senior exercise. They had another, and you can jump in at any time, Patty, if I misstate something. They had another agency give them some money or whatever that they were able to get some additional weights and bands, so they have some extra money left over for the senior weights and bands. And what they would like to do, because of growth within the library there at the Generations building, build some bookshelves. They're getting overstocked with books at this time, and they need some place to put them. So they requested through the Committee on Aging to reallocate $640 of the funds that we've approved here to build bookshelves into the library. So I guess at this time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we reallocate $640 of the prior approved money for shades and weights to the PIC so that they can purchase shelves to be utilized in the library.
Thank you.
Second it.
We have a first and a second to approve the recommendation as explained by Alderman Williams for the $640 for Plymouth Intergenerational Coalition. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Williams,
Yes?
Nelson.
Yes.
Fernsler,
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a update on PIC agreement for contract services. And again, Alderman Williams.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the liaison from this council to the Plymouth Intergenerational Coalition Board, in December, they held kind of what I guess would call the last meeting, the state of the Generation building. So there's a few items that came out that I wanted to convey to the council. When we first, there was an issue regarding involvement of the liaison with the PIC board, and Mayor Pullman, Administrator Jurgis, and myself are meeting with representatives from PIC, and I feel that issue is going to be dealt with and come to a satisfactory conclusion. At the time that the contract was awarded to PIC, we indicated to them that we hoped that they would utilize this current contract to look for resources other than donations and financial support from the city to sustain the facility out there. It's a great facility. It's a real asset not only to Plymouth but Sheboygan County, but unfortunately it does require money, and so we encourage them during the term of this contract to look for other sources of funding. One thing that they've done out there is they started a membership plan. They've had a very positive response. They had $44,000 of membership fees committed, and they have so far collected approximately $40,000 of that. So that was a very positive step in the right direction. And also a very positive step is that they have established an endowment with the Lakeshore Community Foundation. We had previously had some experience with them, and it's based out of Green Bay, and it's another very positive step, I feel, for the PIC board to establish that endowment. They have also taken over operation of the meal site and the Piccadilly delicatessen lunch location there. They have some new management of that deli. They are working on updating and upgrading the menu, and they are beginning the process to try to organize additional events that will require some catering there at Generations. And they are working with Marion College out of Fond du Lac to promote and organize conferences at Generations. And as an aside, I know that they've also utilized grad students and so forth from Lakeland for various programs out there. They're doing some outreach and bringing in some young minds to help them with various programs. In regards to program, the usage out there has increased. From the figures I've looked at, there is an average of in excess of 200 people a day coming there to the Generations that utilize the programs. They are looking to increase specific speaker programs for people. They're in the process right now of trying to find out what people are interested in, what would be beneficial, and bringing in experts with various topics and so forth. And I'm going to be working with them out there to develop some programs related to veterans issues. And when spring gets here, we're going to see a lot more outdoor activities. They've got t-ball, pickleball, shuffleboard. They've got the outdoor track put together with the various exercise stations and other things going on. They are constantly adding programs. And I'm also pleased to report that they've increased their outreach. They're currently working with Community Ed in Plymouth on sharing several programs so that there's not a duplication of programs. And that appears to be going very well because now Generation members can obtain reduced rates for Community Ed programs. So the last thing I wanted to mention that Plymouth Intergenerational has been is a national award winner for Best Intergenerational Community, and that award will be presented in a ceremony to occur in Washington, D.C. So that's a real feather in their cap for a size of, Plymouth and whatever. I'll be working with some of the students to produce some informational videos type things to try to play off of this a little bit. Hopefully have other intergenerational facilities want to see how Plymouth does it so well. And I do have the announcement of that I'll pass around here, and which I do hope I have. But that the only thing I noticed is that there were 3 winners of that, and one national finalist, and the name kind of hit me a little bit. That is the city of Surprise, Arizona. When you get asked, where are you from? Surprise! So I'll hand that around. So basically, I think that they're doing an excellent job out there, generations. The senior programs are being addressed. Intergenerational programming, I think, is being well addressed. And are there any questions?
I just wanted to add that it's through the MetLife Foundation is the award, I believe.
Yes.
And we're the second Wisconsin community, I believe, to be named best intergenerational community. The Shorewood, Wisconsin was the first in the state in Milwaukee, and we're the second in the state to be recognized under this program that I'm aware of.
Sounds like a very good report, and certainly something that we can be proud of in our midst, and they're on the right track, and that's important. And partnering, as you said, with various groups and organizations, and everybody collaborating, which is exactly what we want on that. If we could have the clerk make a copy of this and put it in all the mailboxes for the aldermen, would be nice. That's nice news, so that's terrific. We appreciate the update and look forward to more reports coming from the committee. Thank you, Alderman Williams. Moving on, item C, approve certified survey map from Anchor Bank, Milwaukee, regarding property located behind Advance Auto off of Eastern Avenue. This was recommended by the Plan Commission on January 8th, and simply a brief description is that little right-hand lower corner is what's being surveyed off as an outlot. The terrain there drops rather drastically, and Anchor Bank feels that with that off of there, it gives them much greater flexibility. It can't be built on. It's an outlot. It will have its own tax ID number for real estate, but obviously there's not much value there, and it won't be built on. But it gives them better turning radius and so on. And that was brought up at the Plan Commission. So that's a long and short explanation on that. The chair will entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the certified survey map for Anchor Bank, Milwaukee.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Markham.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Next item is old business. Item 9A, approve payment of claim against the city from Gary and Kathy Gebler in the amount of $2,500. I'll ask Clerk Huberty for a brief explanation, and then we'll entertain a motion.
At the last, I believe it was a closed meeting of the Common Council, they made a recommendation to staff to submit an offer to the Geblers in payment of the claim that they had submitted back in October. The Geblers came in and spoke with Administrator Jurgis and I, and at the end of the conversation, they agreed to sign the form. This does also include not only the payment of to the Geblers, the city will also remove at least one tree and both trees, if they so choose to have both trees removed, and covering the charge for the stump removal. So that is what the offer as it was presented to the Geblers.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion.
So move, Alder Hanson.
Second, Alder Markham.
We have a first and a second to approve the claim against the city from Gary and Kathy Gebler in the amount of $2,500. Any further discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Williams,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Fernsler,
Yes.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item 9B, approve cancellation agreement and mutual release regarding the sale of 200 Reed Street. Attorney Feber, you want to give us a brief summary on that?
Sure. The council should have in your packet correspondence from me dated January 8th, and on the back of that, you'll see is the cancellation agreement and mutual release. As you might recall, that the council approved the sale of 200 Reed Street, which is the Reed Street garage. There was a purchase price of $10,000. It was going to be sold to John and Christina Wolf. Prior to closing, Christina Wolf passed away. The Wolf family then reached out to Administrator Jurgis and advised that they weren't interested in purchasing the property any longer. So what this cancellation and mutual release does is it acknowledges there was an offer, and it was an accepted offer, but that both parties are now releasing all interest that they had in that offer, and everybody's going their separate ways. So it's undoing the agreement that was approved in November.
Thank you. Clerk Huberty?
And just to note that Mr. Wolf's son did drop off the signed agreement to my office this afternoon.
Okay,
He has signed it.
waiting for our approval.
Right.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion.
So move, Alder Nelson.
Second, Alder Williams.
We have a first and a second to approve the cancellation agreement and mutual release regarding the sale of 200 Reed Street. Any further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Fowler,
Yes.
Fernsler,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item 10, new business. Item A, approve real estate mortgage subordination agreement with GTS Solutions LLC and authorize city administrator, utility manager, and city clerk treasurer to sign the agreement. Administrator Jurgis, you want to give us a brief summary on that, please?
Sure. As you may be aware, Community Bank was involved with the GTS expansion on Willow Road, and the official legal entity is GTS Solutions LLC. A few years ago, back in 2012, 12 or 13, the city of Plymouth accessed a USDA rural development financing to help with that phase one, which was roughly 87,000 square feet. We have $500,000 loan that is at 0% that GTS is paying back over a 10-year period. Well, with the phase two, which is another approximately 86,000 square feet, they're getting additional financing through Community Bank and Trust, and I believe also SBA financing, and that requires an additional subordination agreement. So we'd be subordinating to the debt on the phase two as well. So in order for that financing to move forward and be finalized, we need to approve this agreement for that phase two, which then brings the property up to 190, about 190,000 square feet or so. The long-term plans could go on. Their long-term expansion plans is anywhere from 400,000 to 600,000 square feet, I think. So basically, a third to half of their build-out will be completed with this phase two.
Thank you, Administrator Yurgis. Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved, Alderman Markham.
Second, Alderman Williams.
We have a first and a second to approve the real estate mortgage subordination agreement with GTS Solutions LLC as indicated. Any further discussion? Alderman Hanson?
Every time this expands, it helps the TIF.
Yeah, I mean, it does, it will help the TIF. It's located in the TIF district. You know, we're still trying to figure out what phase one is valued at, but it's in the TIF. There's no TIF increment being pledged to this project. So yes.
Clerk will call the roll.
Markham.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item B, approve purchase of street sweeper from Envirotech Equipment, Pewaukee, Wisconsin, for the cost of $234,884. Bill Imig, our engineer, is here. You want to give us a brief summary on that, Bill?
Sure. Pretty sure I sent a memo with this, that
Yep.
we did look at two different sweepers. One's a Johnston and one was an Elgin. We currently have an Elgin, so I'm surprised we're not getting an Elgin again, but Charlie and Kenny and Dennis, who all work with the sweeper and fix the sweeper and run the sweeper, tried both pieces of equipment out. We've talked to communities that have each machine. I think it was Manitowoc has an Elgin and a Johnston, and they prefer the Johnston. It's easier maintenance. We budgeted $235,000. I just to let you know, when we first got the price for this thing, it was quite a bit higher, and we kind of told the company how much we had in the budget, and lo and behold, they came in on our budget. So it's in our budget. This is a piece of equipment that should last. The one we have now is about, I think it was in '94, so that's getting to be 21 years old. So it has the attachment to clean catch basins, and it sweeps streets. And we wanted to get the cab over instead of a typical truck, because it just makes it easier to operate. It's a little added expense, but something that's going to be around this long, we feel is worth it. So are there any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the purchase of the street sweeper as indicated.
So moved, Alderman Fowler.
Second, Alder Nelson.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Markham.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item C, approve purchase of Vactron model LP 83-3 SDT trailer mounted vacuum excavator demo unit from Vermeer, Little Chute, Wisconsin, for the cost of $51,775. Can you give us a little insight into that, Bill? I don't see Jim here.
Yeah, just so you know, Jim wasn't asked to attend tonight.
Well, what I've seen the piece of equipment sitting down at the utilities. It's a trailer-mounted excavator that digs holes about, I'd guess about 8 inches. It has an 8-inch vacuum suction on it, and you just kind of suck the dirt out, and it shoots water down, so that when you're working around wires or cables or underground facilities, you don't damage them. It's an insurance policy, so that when we are digging to put a pole in or to doing some backhoe work, the electrical utility would probably use it mostly, but the water department has plans to use it. And when we're digging, and if we're digging up a sewer line, if you need to expose the gas line, it's that kind of thing. And the other part of it was that it saves people's backs. The insurance company's happy we're getting it because it's, less strain using a vac than a shovel. So.
Good, thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the Vactron model as indicated for $51,775.
So moved, Alder Markham.
Second, Alder Hanson.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Fernsler,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Hildebrand, Markham,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Item D, approve mayoral appointment of Jackie Jarvis to the Park Commission to fill the vacant position to May 1st, 2018. The chair will entertain a motion.
So moved, Alder Hanson.
Second.
We have a first and a second to approve the mayoral appointment to the Park Commission. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. Motion to adjourn.
So